No todos los días se puede charlar, se tiene el privilegio de hablar con una auténtica leyenda de la música, pero buenas noticias porque hoy sí que es ese día. Pete Townshend, bienvenido a RockFM.
Hello, thanks for having me.
El 28 de marzo vamos a poder disfrutar de un nuevo lanzamiento porque por primera vez concentras todos tus álbumes de estudio en solitario en una edición deluxe. ¿Qué significa para ti ver toda tu carrera al margen de The Who reunida en un solo lugar?
Well, it's a bit of a surprise. I wasn't expecting it. I didn't even know about it until last month. Anyway, it's nice to see it all. Nice to see. They picked a nice picture for the cover. I'm very pleased with that. I look very handsome.
¿Crees que alguna de tus canciones en solitario podría haber formado de alguna manera parte de un álbum de The Who?
Oh, yes, definitely. You know, when I wrote songs for The Who and when I wrote songs for myself, I really didn't have a client in mind, as it were. I didn't have a customer in mind. I didn't think, well, I'm going to write this song for a solo album or this song for The Who. I just wrote the song. And so when it came to doing a solo project, I picked whatever I had at the time. And when I worked for The Who, when it came to do recordings with The Who, I picked whatever was available at the time.
Pete, mencionaste que tus trabajos en solitario surgieron como una forma de autoexpresión, de terapia, de diversión también, no como descartes de The Who. También reconociste que algunas malas decisiones a principios de los 80 que tomaste pues podrían haber cambiado tu trayectoria. ¿Podrías confesarnos alguna decisión de aquella época y qué lecciones aprendiste de ella?
Oh dear, we all make good and bad decisions. You know, so I admit to making some bad decisions and now you want me to make a list of them? Is that what you want me to do?
¿Alguna que se pueda decir? No.
No, I'm not going to do that.
Bueno, Pete, para mí eres un auténtico visionario del rock, siempre has sido por delante. Sin ir más lejos, las nuevas generaciones siempre acuden a The Who. ¿Cómo te hace sentir esto? ¿Qué crees que es lo que hace que vuestras canciones no pasen de moda?
It's not something I set out to do. I think I was very lucky, as I often say at this point in an interview, very lucky with my education. I went to art school and studied under the great Roy Ascott, who was a visionary himself. He foresaw the coming of computers as desktop items, which musicians and writers and creative people could use. He foresaw them as being useful for translation, between which we're now hoping that with AI coming along, we can see another advance where we wouldn't have to do with this translation business. I could just talk to you and you would hear Spanish. That would be good, wouldn't it? I've thought often that I've just lived through imagination. You know, my creativity is imagination, and sometimes that leads me to be seen to be somebody that doesn't always tell the truth. But often it means that whatever you say is going to happen. It will happen. You just have to wait. You just have to wait for a while and it will happen. So I think I've been lucky in that respect. So it's just really been about imagination. Since I was about 11 or 12 years old, no, maybe younger, maybe 7 or 8 years old, I retreated into an imaginative world, a world of imagination and self-expression that way, and that became very useful to me when I became a writer.
Tú que ayudaste a definir el sonido del rock, ¿cómo ves la escena actual? ¿Algo que te emocione especialmente, que te sorprenda, Pete?
No.
No.
So there's nothing significant right at the moment. I think there's lots of really great indie bands. I really like Idols, for example. I really like Sam Fender. I really like Inga Lambu. I played on Inga Lambu's new single. She's an young artist from Holland. You know, there's a lot of talented people out there, but it's difficult at this particular point in time to break new ground. We I had a conversation on Zoom with Timbo, the other day, and he's decided to work only with AI. That's what he's going to do. He's fed up with working with difficult rappers who make his life a misery. So he's going to work with AI. And he played me some of his stuff, and it's really quite fantastic. When I go onto AI programs like Suno and I do stuff, what I produce is not very good. It's not bad, but it's not very good. So I don't think I'll be making an AI album very soon. But AI is where the next breakthrough is going to be. I think one of the difficulties we have to deal with at the moment as artists is making a living, being able to make music and live, make music and eat, make music and have a place to sleep. This is not a business where you get rich anymore. It's a business where you struggle to survive. Just performing is hard. Everything is hard about it. Sam Fender went online the other day and said he got into trouble about it. He didn't quite get cancelled, but it was very well meant what he said. He said that he was very lucky because he was an ordinary working class artist who had been lucky enough to get a hit record and be able to do concerts, but that so many other artists that he's come across who have been lucky enough to make records and do concerts are the families, the children of wealthy people. In other words, you need money to be able to become an artist now. That's not good. That's not good.
Pete, una vez dijiste que la guitarra era como un arma de destrucción masiva. ¿Cuántos crímenes sonoros crees que has cometido?
I think that's a bit of an exaggeration. I think the guitar. I've always had a bit of a problem with the guitar. I think the first thing was getting my father, who was a musician, a very good musician, to accept that I was going to be a guitar player. He didn't want me to become a guitar player. He encouraged me to be an artist. He encouraged me to be a journalist, So I think, and also my grandmother, who I didn't like, my maternal grandmother, bought me my first guitar, and it was terrible, terrible guitar. So I got some anger issues associated with the guitar. I think when I first bought my first very, very precious guitar, a Rickenbacker, the Rickenbacker guitar is not a great instrument at all. It's an okay instrument. It's not a bad instrument. But the Beatles used them, so they were beautiful and they looked good, and the Beatles used them. I paid like £300,000, which today, like, I don't know, something like 15 or 20,000 euros for a guitar that is really just okay. I've always had a love, not a love-hate relationship with guitar, but I see it as an instrument. I see it as a tool. I see it as something that I can work with. It's not something sacred to me. So many people view their guitar as being a sacred thing. Some guitar players have the same guitar their whole life.
De todos los destrozos de guitarras que hiciste a lo largo de toda tu carrera y seguirás haciendo, Pete, ¿hay alguno del cual te arrepientas? ¿Alguna que te doliera especialmente romper?
Yeah, I think I regret breaking all of them. I would very much like to have them all back. Yeah, no, but they serve their purpose. They were the collateral of whose stage show damage.
Si tuvieras, Pete, que formar una banda ahora, en 2025, ¿cómo sería? ¿Cómo sonarían The Who este año?
I think I would, in a sense, I have a band today. I am a band. I've always been a band. I've always been somebody who writes songs in the studio. I love working in the studio. I had my first studio when I was 16. The Who's first hits, like I Can't Explain, My Generation, those records from the early days I made in my studio before I played them to The Who. I think the recording studio is a band now. When I was young, I always wanted a laptop type thing that would have everything in it that would allow me to record music, make music, and also play instruments that I couldn't play, like the violin, like the flute, and so on and so forth. I could play the guitar and I could play a bit of keyboards. So we're at that point now where if I want to put a band together, I can do it. I can do it in in my bedroom. I have many recording studios in my life, but I always have a recording studio in my bedroom. This is what I'm using now. I've got a laptop and I've got a couple of speakers and a breakout box, and I've got some guitars behind me. If the whim took me to do some recording now, I could. Most musicians are not like me. Most musicians do two things that I don't really do or don't enjoy doing. One is they love performing. I don't love performing. I don't like being on a stage. I don't mind being on a stage. I don't hate it, but it doesn't fill my soul in the way that you see some performers, just their soul is filled through being on the stage. That's not me. The other thing is they love to collaborate with other musicians. You know, you imagine, for example, in a flamenco group, you know, without the guitar, without the dancing, without the hand claps, the miracles, the accidents that happen when that is going on, you wouldn't have flamenco and the dancing that surrounds it in the way that we do in the classic Spanish tradition. On the other hand, you know, you do have musicians who, Paco de Lucia, for example, who will pick up the guitar and play it, and I'm quite comfortable listening to them play that on their own because he's a genius. But I think that for me, collaboration is something that I find very difficult. If I was in a studio like with a really, really great musician or with a group of really great musicians, I think I would find it very hard. I often do find it very hard. I find it difficult to collaborate. I find it very difficult looking in the eyes of another musician. I find myself looking to my own energy to express myself. So I'm very different to most musicians in that respect. On the other hand, of course, I really, really admire the process of collaboration. I admire the process of dance and music. You know, Quadrophenia is currently being turned into a ballet. We had our first rehearsal on Monday. It's going to be fantastic. But I think one of the things about that is that kind of degree of collaboration, it's an exploration of the human body, of dancing. With music, I find myself wanting to stay in my box for a while. You know, I've always made demos in my studio of songs that I want other people to record.
De eso mismo te quería hablar, sobre tus colaboraciones, Pete, porque has colaborado con Eric Clapton, con Nina Simone, Charlie Watts, David Gilmour, John Lee Hooker. Si mañana te dieran la oportunidad de subirte a un escenario con cualquier artista, vivo o muerto, ¿a quién elegirías y por qué?
You know, after what I just said about collaboration, it's not what I would want to do. You know, I don't. I'm playing with Roger next week at the Teen Cancer shows at the Royal Albert Hall, and I think that's going to be enough for me for this month. You know, those musicians that you list. I mean, I loved working with David Gilmour on my White City album, and we co-wrote together some songs, but that was an uneasy collaboration. You know, I actually made it clear I'm not a natural collaborator, and I really enjoyed working with Eric Clapton back in the 1973 when we did the Rainbow concert together. I don't know. I think it's interesting because so many musicians that I really respect want to work with me. And I wish I was more open to it. I could have fun with some of the greatest musicians in the world, but I tend to say no.
Okay. Si en los años 70, Pete, hubieras tenido acceso a la inteligencia artificial, ¿cómo crees que hubiera sonado Tommy o Quadrophenia?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know. You know, I really don't know. I had synthesizers for Quadrophenia. I didn't have synthesizers for Tommy, so I just used guitars, keyboards, organs, John Entwistle played the French horn. We had drums and bass and so on. We just used the recording studio as an instrument. With Quadrophenia, I used John Entwistle's brass. You know, he played French horn and so on, and trumpet and flugelhorn. But I had synthesizers, so I could reproduce the sound of oboe and strings, violin, cello, and flutes and stuff. And I just used the tools that I had. You know, I have AI available to me now. You know, so at the moment, I'm just finishing a big orchestral project, an opera that I've been working on for a long time called The Age of Anxiety. I should have it finished in a couple of months. And that's a mixture of orchestra and electronic music together. And I think if I'd had AI for that, I don't know quite how it would have enriched what I do. I think, let's put it this way. I'm a composer. I go to AI and I say, compose me this according to the brief that I write. I give that brief. Let's say I want to write an opera about a young man who hears music in his head and it makes him crazy. That's the story of The Age of Anxiety. That's my opera. That's my idea. I came up with it. I then say to AI, you produce an opera for me based on that description. What I deny myself the right to do is to enjoy the journey of exploration that I set out on when I do the composition. If I find it difficult to collaborate with other musicians, I may find it quite difficult to collaborate with AI as well. I don't know. But it's not that it's not that the idea is lazy. It's just that the idea, you know, I think 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, the computational power of the software and computer power, the engines used to drive AI computers, increased in power by nearly 200%, which would mean that for me to say to AI, I want to do a Mickey Mouse cartoon with Mickey coming along and hitting somebody over the head with a bottle. 4 weeks ago, that would have taken an hour for AI to do. This week, it will take 6 seconds. So the speed at which the AI produces the work is a difficulty because I have to keep up. You know, I'm a normal human being and I have to keep up with the speed at which my instructions, as somebody instructing AI or requesting AI to produce creative images or sounds or music or writing or whatever for me, paintings, is the speed at which I can respond. That's one of the things that's so difficult, is that we have to try to keep up. And so in a sense, a very, very real sense, one of the learning curves of working with AI will be our limitations in being able to instruct it in a way that's useful to us, but not to deny ourselves the joy of making the art, not to deny ourselves the joy of painting the painting, not to deny ourselves the joy of writing the story. Why would we do that?
Después de décadas, Pete, de giras, discos, locura extrema, ¿cómo es un día normal en la vida de Pete Townshend?
I think what's happening is, you know, in May, on May 19th next month, or in May this year, I'll be 80, and I've just had an operation on my knee because I had an accident with my knee a while ago, and I had a knee replacement, and I'm recovering from that. I would love to say that I'd spent all the time in recovery reading good books, watching good films, practicing my guitar. But in fact, what I've actually done a lot of the time is just sleep. So I think I'm very concerned to try to make the best. I feel very lucky to be alive. I feel very lucky to be fit. I am very healthy. I'm very lucky to be in a wonderful marriage with Rachel, who's my partner, who's an orchestrator and a brilliant talent in her own right. I'm very happy to have my son Joseph working with me. Very happy to have 2 grandchildren with my other kids, my 2 daughters, Emma and Aminta. I'm happy that my first wife and I are still friends and not enemies.
Bueno.
I am happy too that, you know, that Roger Daltrey and I are very different. We've always been very, very different. It's been one of our problems is it's not that we're enemies, not that we're fighting, but that we're so different. We're very different kinds of people. You know, he's a worker and an old-fashioned worker, you know, very practical man, very solid, very straight thinking. And I'm up in the sky, up with the fairies. And but that we're friends. I'm very happy that we're friends and that we look forward to working together in whatever we can in our final years. But every day for me, I'm happy to be able to pretty much do what I want. You know, I have the choice to do what I want, and I think having that right, having for so many years, being in a band. It was like being in the army or the navy, you know, do this, do that, do that, go home, you know, have sex with your wife, have another child, do this, do that, do this, do that, go back, have sex with your wife, have another child, do this, you know, it was like kind of crazy. And I feel free now, which is an extraordinary feeling to feel. I feel free. I can also devote my time to what is the most important thing for me, which seems very small, but it's really so important, which is to be useful. I want to be useful. I don't want to be somebody that creates great art that changes the world. I just want to do useful things that will help people.
Pete, ha sido un honor, un placer, que sepas que somos la única radio en España que pone The Who todos los días, así que esperamos que cuando pases por España, por Madrid, te vengas aquí a visitarnos a los estudios de RockFM.
Oh, great, fantastic. Thank you so much.
We love you, Pete. Mwah.